welcome to today's webinar, Why It's Important to Design for Newcomers. My name is Catherine Houtman, and I am the Director of MadPow's Center for Health Experience Design. I just want to give a couple of slides before Priyama kicks off her content. So first off, we are an organization that is part of MadPow, and MadPow is a strategic design agency that leverages the psychology of motivation to create innovative experiences and compelling digital solutions that are good for people and good for business. And I am the director of the Center for Health Experience Design, and that's a community of over 800 professionals and a range of organizations in the health space. Our partners include fledgling startups and global corporations. So just a little bit about the center is that we really focus on collaboration. So one of the things that we like to do is piece together and govern multi-stakeholder initiatives that are open to and will benefit the greater community. We also offer a membership to accelerate your innovation efforts. So these memberships are a very lightweight way to strategically extend your team and bring in niche expertise. So membership includes access to subject matter experts, MadPow design services, discounts on our HXD conference, workshops, and much more. If you want to learn more about the center, just visit our website at centerhxd.com. And just wanted to let you know is that we have each year a Health Experience Design Conference in Boston. Our one for 2020 is scheduled for April 14th and 15th. Registration is open at hxdconf.com. Head over there. We're filling out our schedule hopefully in the next week or so. We're posting up all our keynotes. It's a really great conference in order to engage with other people that are really interested in transforming the health experience.
Right. Hi, everyone. This is Priyama Barua. I'm an Experience Strategy Director at MadPow. And today I'm going to speak about why it's important to design for newcomers. So before I get into the content, a little bit about what I do and what MadPow does. MadPow, as Catherine mentioned, is a strategic design company, so we offer a variety of services ranging from experience research to development, service design, content design, etc. But my role here at MadPow is more towards that first column that you see here. So as part of my work, we do a lot of research in the health space, creating strategies for companies going forward. A big part of my work is ensuring that processes of companies that may seem to be unaligned are aligned in a seamless manner and they work well for people, while at the same time looking at behind-the-scenes systems that enable those interactions to happen and keeping them seamless and invisible to the customer. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not from here. I moved to the US 5 years ago, and one of the things I immediately noticed was how systems were not designed for people that were new to the States. Every year, there are millions of people that come to the United States for the very first time, and they come here for very different reasons. It could be that they're here to study, to work, to become a scholar, to conduct business, medical reasons. There's several reasons why they might be here. But I had to ask myself, are the different interactions that we're designing meeting these unique needs of someone who might be completely new to a system or a country? As an ethnographic researcher, I do keep a lookout all the time for systems that are not working well. And when I speak to more people, it helps me understand that this is not unique to just me, but also to other people. But as I put together this talk with some of my personal experiences, but I also spoke to a few people that had moved to the US for the very first time. So here are some of their stories. So, well, the first story is actually mine, about the first time I came to the US as a tourist in 2013. And this is a story about the time I went to Chipotle because I had heard it was really good. Now, this was one of the most stressful experiences of my life because I was new I didn't understand people's accents, so I couldn't understand what was going on. I didn't understand the format of the restaurant, so just looking at the board wasn't enough for me to know. And these lines move fast, and I was expected to move fast along with it, but I couldn't. I didn't go back to Chipotle for a very long time because it was truly a stressful experience for me. This next story is about Mr. Scalfi. This is a picture of him when I was here in the U.S. for the very first time. He comes to the U.S. often to conduct business, and he speaks very little English, so he usually travels with a translator. This story is actually about the time he visited the White House. He parked his car somewhere and walked around, did touristy things, and came back to his car to notice that it was going to get towed. Turns out he hadn't understood the parking signs. They said something else when he parked, and then the rules changed, so he couldn't really understand what was going on. But that was not what surprised him. What surprised him was that the police officer that was giving him a ticket at that point had a long conversation with him, was very nice, and spoke to him about his life, where he's from, etc. But as Mr. Scalzi says, he gave him a ticket anyway. Where he's from, which is Italy, police officers are not that nice, and if they are nice to you, they'll probably let you go without a ticket. This next story is about Sandra. She's from Ghana, and she came to the U.S. to study at the Harvard School of Public Health. When she was preparing for this adventure of hers, she tells me that she did a lot of research. She spoke to several people. She read some books about studying in the U.S. and how she should be prepared for this. But when she got here, no one prepared her for how much everything in the U.S. depends on networking. As she tells it to me, if she had known that was going to be a big focus of her time here, she would have spent more time networking and less time in the classroom. And this is Indranil. He moved here to work as part of his company. He transferred over from India to the US. When he first moved here, he was surprised by the sheer amount of choices in retail stores. Just the milk section alone scared him off because there was so many different types. There was 2%, there was 1%, almond milk, etc. There was just a lot of options. What also surprised him was the work culture in the U.S. Where he's from, people don't come to work at 9 o'clock and leave at 5 o'clock, and that surprised him a lot, as he was used to more longer hours of work and even working on Saturdays. And this is Vinay. He's from Thailand. He moved here to be with his brother. It took him more than 20 years to get his green card, but he finally moved here with his daughter and got a job almost immediately. What was different for Vinay was the sheer variety of accents that are in the U.S. As he tells it to me, there are Hispanic accents, there are African American accents, there are accents from other immigrants. He had a really tough time getting used to that. He also didn't have health insurance for almost 5 years that he was living here. And he didn't know that he could claim his daughter as a dependent on his tax forms. So these are some of the things that he struggled with. There are many other stories such as this. These are just a few examples of people that hopefully will help you understand how different can look like for different people. So let's break it down. What are those aspects that make people's experience different? Firstly, there is the use of English in colloquial terms. A lot of people may speak English as a second language or may just speak it very differently to how people speak it in the US. So terms such as this is not familiar to them. This is an example of the time I went to a pizza shop very early in my time here, and someone asked me if I had been rung up, and I couldn't understand what they meant because I thought, would they be calling me on the telephone? And the person there was nice enough to explain to me what he meant, but use of language that is not commonly used is difficult for new people to understand. Secondly, people that are new to the States have different accents. And surprisingly to me, many people construe accent as a measure of intelligence, and they're also often not very nice when someone speaks with an accent. So this is not just people, but also customer service representatives, people at shops, at restaurants, etc., that do not have a great attitude to people with an accent. Thirdly, there is cultural differences that arise. Um, Something that I hear often from people new to the States is this whole idea that they can participate in health decisions, speak to their doctor, come with ideas, talk about tests, talk about clinical trials, etc. That is not common in a lot of places in the world, and this is completely new to several people that move here. In fact, this is a learned skill, and several people I know have lived here all their lives do not have this learned skill. Then there is cultural references that occur. Often in business meetings, it is very common to use cultural references to drive home the point. But for several people, like Mr. Scalfi also talked about, use of these cultural references is difficult for them to relate to when they're here to conduct business. Then there is process differences. Places all over the world obviously have different processes, and they're not always intuitive and easy to understand. And that is a huge part of the perceived difference when people move here. So these are some of the things, I'm sure there are more that can possibly come out of this list, but these are some of the things that I talked about as things that I heard over and over that was different for newcomers. But before I go ahead, I'd like to float this idea to you guys. I talked a lot about people that are new to the States, but when I began thinking about this more, I realized that it is not just people that are new to the States that have some of these problems that I just outlined. I believe that everyone is a newcomer to something, and everyone is a newcomer to a particular service or a product, or they might even face similar challenges that I talked about before. For example, someone from the South might have a strong accent, or someone from Boston might have a strong accent, and that is very similar to someone who is from outside the country who has a strong accent. People may be moving to a new place. There might be different reasons where they have to get used to a new environment. So there are people, for example, who may just get out of college and it's time for them to take over their own finances, their whole own health insurance, so they really start adulting. There could be people who move back after being abroad for a very long time and have to get used to how things work here. There are several people who join the military right out of high school, and then they have to enter back into mainstream life, and that's different for them. And as I mentioned earlier, there are people who could have a regional accent, which is very different. And there are people who could have moved to a new place, taken the whole family with them, only to discover that things work there very differently to what they're used to. In healthcare, especially, because healthcare is something that everyone interacts with at some point in their lives, there is the first time people may be seeing a specialist and not knowing how the referral process works, how everything behind the scenes for that works. First time going to the ER, ordering specialty medications, which might be different from the regular medications they get at a pharmacy, or getting a prior authorization for a procedure or for a test, or receiving a big bill that they don't understand and then having to navigate resolving that bill. Or it could be that they've received a cancer diagnosis and have to go for their very first infusion, or just a really big diagnosis. There could be times where people might need Medicaid for the very first time, and almost everyone would be transitioning to Medicare at some point in their lives. So there is a first time for everything. I'd like to talk to you guys about mental models. This might be a construct which is familiar to several of you, but for those that it's not, mental model is the way we perceive the world. It's sort of our personal algorithm of how we look at things and deal with things around us. At MadPow, we do a lot of work at mapping out mental models, especially in the healthcare space and insurance space, which is one of the toughest spaces to understand. We look at people's journeys and how they perceive different parts of that journey, and what are their mindsets when it comes to approaching a problem or navigating a tough situation. What it really is, what it all boils down to is that a mental model could be completely different for two different people. You could think that you're on the same page for something, but you're really not, and you're just thinking of two versions of the exact same thing. Just another example to drive that point home. Imagine that you're designing a shoe or a different kind of a shoelace for a shoe, and you're thinking of all these different options and ways that it could happen. But what if the audience that you're designing for has never worn a shoe in their entire life and they have never encountered something like a shoe before? So what does this mean for us as service designers, UX designers, innovators, researchers, anyone who is trying to make a difference and impact in people's lives? Firstly, why do we even have to consider this lens? Why is this important to our process? I believe that the best customer strategy is a satisfied customer, and we're definitely seeing more and more that customers are expecting to self-serve. They don't want to be told how to do something. They expect the process to be so simple that they can figure it out for themselves. And when they can't figure it out for themselves, it often leads to errors in what they're doing, whether it's errors in interacting with the system or errors in judgment that can have a huge impact on their lives later down the line. And all of this leads to very frustrated customers who can't figure out why that particular product or service just cannot be simple enough for them. So we want to decrease dependency. We want to increase intuitive flow of things and processes and how they work. We want to minimize human error. And we definitely want to avoid costly fixes in future. So every time a customer makes an error while interacting with our product or service, it is a cost to the company to fix that particular error. So we talk often about design being intuitive. This is something that comes up often and often. But when we talk about newcomers, I'd like to float this idea that intuitive may not be the same thing for everyone. The only intuitive interface, I believe, is the nipple, and after that, it's all learned. This is a picture of my nephew at a gaming arcade. This was his first time at that gaming arcade. And when he went there, I was following him around and observing what he was doing because, I'm an ethnographic researcher. That's what I do. And it was surprising to me that he was able to figure out those machines immediately. He knew what buttons to press. He knew what levers to pull. He could navigate those machines really easily, and it surprised me because, as I mentioned, that was his first time there. So this got me thinking about if gaming arcades are really intuitively designed. But then I thought about all the toys he has at home, and all the times that he has interacted with those toys and the buttons and the levers and everything that he had. So it turned out, and I clearly understood that the reason he was able to clearly use these gaming arcade machines was because he had a prior mental model that he had built over time using the toys at home. So when does it really become important for us to apply a newcomer lens to design? What are those different industries? There are these industries that people are, I would consider them sort of high stakes industries, such as healthcare and personal finance, while others are just companies that it's inevitable that newcomers would be interacting with. So the first time you walk into the new format of a retail store, or the time you go to a DMV for your very first time to get your license done, or higher education that has a large number of international students as well as people from the US entering college. Then there are brands with a global audience that need to do this research and due diligence to understand the difference between the US and the different countries. There is obviously hospitality industry, which has a high number of tourists coming to the US every year. And when we are thinking of these, we should take a wide lens in design. We're not just talking about one user interface. We need to take an end-to-end systems thinking approach to design these better services. We should be looking at user interfaces, social media. Is the language being used there different to what we have on our websites? Emails that are being sent out, printouts, voice interface, which I'll talk about more in a minute. Point of sale and all these new different techniques of swiping your card and self checkout. What is the staff doing? What does the signage look like? Does it all map up to each other? Does it all match? Are there differences that might cause confusion? And there is space, content, and definitely process is another thing that we need to be looking at as designers. So before I get into some of the tips of what we could be doing, let me share with you some examples of people that are clearly doing better than others when it comes to designing for newcomers. Boston.gov is a great example of very, very well laid out user interface and content. This is a screenshot that I remember taking when I got married in Boston. I had obviously never gotten married in Boston before, so I had to figure out the whole process from the beginning. And as you can see here, it clearly lays out the two different steps: pick up a marriage license and then go to the ceremony. And for each one of these tabs, there is a detailed description of what happens first, what happens next, etc. So even if you have no idea about the process, it's clearly laid out for you. Similarly, they do a great job of offering up information. So if you have a car in the city, what are the different things you could possibly be doing for that car? Would you need to pay a parking ticket, get a resident permit, appeal a parking ticket? And there's a whole list of things under that appears that clearly serves up what needs to be done. Their search feature is also really good to get to the information that you need. Then just looking more minutely at services for internationals, Deserve is this credit card that is given out to people without a credit history. So you don't really require a social security number, but what happens is that they look at things such as the education or organization you're in, and as you keep using that credit card, it keeps building your credit score. So when you do get your social security, that all adds up to that. So this is an example of someone who is leveraging a business opportunity to design for internationals. Another example of finding a niche and then meeting that need is sprint tax. Doing your taxes as an international person is not the same as doing it as a United States resident. There are different treaties that each country has, and there are some restrictions on what kind of filing can be done. So what Sprint Tax does is it gives people from different backgrounds an option to get their taxes done. So whether it's someone who's here as a camp counselor or even a foreign entertainer or an au pair, each one of them has unique tax needs, and Sprint Tax meets those needs by providing them an easy way to file their taxes. This next example is for doing really robust research in how people perceive language. So this was a story that I had heard at the LavaCon conference in 2017. This is about Google doing research across the world on how some of their phrases were perceived. And they had this sentence that said, "Remember that Google will never ask for your password." It seems like a pretty simple, straightforward sentence, but when they took this to Russia to conduct research over there, they found that this sentence was not well received at all because people associated it with propaganda posters. And it reminded them of this heritage that they didn't really want to think of, and this was clearly language that did not belong there. And then talking about Newcomers, another company that did a really good job of getting people accustomed to their platform is Second Life. So what they found was that when people were using the game, so this is one of those online games where you can make an avatar for yourself. So when they found that when people were coming onto the game for the very first time, other users who were more experienced were hassling them. They were throwing nets on them, and they were just, what was happening was that the new users didn't realize that the other avatars in the game were real people. They thought they were computer controlled. So they were having a high drop-off rate. So to solve this problem, what they did was created this entirely different environment that was quote unquote safe for people to really learn what happens within the game, learn how to move, learn how to communicate, learn how to change their appearance. So you can see there are different islands here that they could move through before they got dropped into the actual game. This is one of my favorite examples of Silvercar by Audi. As you can see over here on the right, when someone is renting a car with Silvercar, they have the option to choose coverage, and you won't see the terms collision, liability, comprehensive here, because what do those terms mean really? It took me a really long time to understand that. And in all honesty, if someone is renting a car from the airport, there is a very good chance that they are international. They're coming here for the first time. So what Silvercar did was made those terms very simple. So just a car, other people and their things, you and their things. So as simple as that, they moved away from an entire industry that is still using these terms to make this language simple for their users. Another great example is Stash. Stash leverages this whole business opportunity of designing for people that are new to managing their personal finances. The entire platform has a lot of educational material, as well as it is designed to meet those unique needs of people learning how to navigate the financial environment. Another example, which is I think fairly new, is Acorns Later. So several of you might be familiar with the Acorns app, which lets you invest spare change. But Acorns Later is just a regular IRA that you can open in less than 30 seconds. And it takes all the thinking out of it. You fill out a simple form that tells about your marital status, whether you're filing jointly, what your income is, and it suggests the right IRA for you, whether it's a Roth IRA or a traditional IRA, and you open it up right there and then. In all honesty, I waited 3 years to open an IRA because I didn't know how, and then I saw this, and I opened it in 30 seconds, and that is a great example of designing for someone new to something. At MathPower, we've obviously done a lot of work around billing because that is one of the main pain points of the healthcare system. So this example that you see over here is a result of a competition of designing a better medical bill. There are many decision pathways that a person can take when navigating a medical bill. So what this design did for them was laid out all the decision pathways so that they know whether they can get help with paying that bill, what poverty guidelines, federal poverty guidelines bracket they fell into. So providing all of the information needed by that person to navigate this bill was designed on this bill. Another great example is Cigna. We all know that, I hope we all know that one of the main pain points of understanding how insurance work is knowing when you have to pay a deductible, when you've met your deductible, what is the co-insurance, what is the out-of-pocket maximum, etc. So what Cigna did was they removed the need to be thinking about where a person is in that payment plan, and they just clearly told them where they are in whether they need to be paying a deductible or they're in the co-insurance phase without using that actual term over here, and then saying out of pocket, but just clearly stating you pay nothing up to the allowed amount. So this is another example of designing for people unfamiliar with the process. There are also entire industries created around people not understanding a system or a process. E-health insurance is a great example of simplifying insurance terms and explaining them in easy to understand videos. Several of you might have even heard of NerdWallet, some of those other examples that help people navigate the financial industry. It's funny to me that the industry is so complex that there are industries around that industry to help people understand the industry. So, what can we do? So, as designers and researchers, the first thing we need to do is put ourselves in the shoes of newcomers to really understand, is my product or service something that is likely to be used for the very first time? And more often than not, the answer is going to be yes. And then ask ourselves, is that first time use is going to be difficult for that person? So we need to conduct and research and do our due diligence in understanding what are the unique needs. At MathPal, when we screen participants for research, we ensure that we add in language that gets us people that are completely new to the system, whether they've been recently diagnosed or it's the first time they've received a bill, etc. So we are very conscious about recruiting people for research in that manner. Several people have invested in translation, especially in healthcare. I think that's a requirement at provider offices. Translation and interpretation, it's a great start. But as I talked about earlier, sometimes translation is not enough because people might speak English, but they might speak it differently. So communicating in sixth grade level English when required, maybe even lower, with people that don't understand English as well is important. In that same vein, avoid idioms, avoid grammatically ambiguous words when you're writing content for your ads or websites or any instructional copy anywhere. Simple language, straightforward language is the best way to go about that. There seems to be a trend of using clever cultural references, which might be right for some brands, but for others, they might have a very wide audience. So it's better to avoid some of these cultural references if this means that a large number of the people interacting with your brand or service is just not going to understand them. And very importantly, as a service designer, I believe that the experience of calling into a call center should not be one that people dread. And one of the main things that is really difficult for someone with an accent is not knowing whether they will get a customer service rep who is a little biased against an accent. So in addition to a lot of companies doing racial bias training, accent bias training, I think is an important aspect to this. Several IVRs are going voice first, and voice first may not always be the right way to go. This is for two reasons. Firstly, people might be limited by their circumstance. They might be making that call in a doctor's office or on a train or in a situation where they don't want to speak their social security number into the phone. There might also be people who, not just people new to the States who might have an accent, but also people that are limited or have a disability that doesn't let them speak clearly. So if your interaction is always voice first without giving people the option to input numbers on the keys, that is eliminating access for a wide range of audiences. And for people with an accent to interact with an IVR without the option to input keys is hell on earth. um, when a process is when a process seems complicated to you, even as a designer, take a second, explain it. Whether it means adding a little microcopy or a little microline that will take up some space, or even an info tip. Don't just assume that people know the process, that people might know the words that you're using. Uh, Even if there is a slight flicker of a doubt, consider explaining this. And for several people, especially new to the system, it helps them to get an idea of the big picture of all the steps that are within that process, and then break down those big things into small steps that they can take. This goes a long way in helping people stay on the product or the service and not drop off from it. And educate users, but at the same time, try not to detract from the main task. There was a time that my husband and me went to buy me my then fiance went to buy me a diamond ring, and the lady in the diamond shop took a long time to explain what the different diamonds meant, what the four C's or three C's meant, and that simple act of education, while not detracting from the main task, went a long way in helping us build brand loyalty. And proactively surface things that people may not know. I remember a research session with a client where someone was complaining about the complicated insurance system and saying, how am I supposed to know? How do I know the things that I don't know? And that quote really stuck with me throughout my career here at MadPa and the work that we've done. And that contrasted very strongly with a stakeholder perspective on the same matter. And the stakeholder was on the side of the argument of they have to do some of the work, they have to do some of the research. But why? We have the ability, we know what is going to happen next. We know the things that the customer should be thinking of next, and there is no reason we shouldn't proactively surface them. And consider pretend environments in which people can really face a high risk situation or a high tension situation before they actually go into it. An example of this is when people receive radiation treatments at hospital. This is a very scary moment where they would be immobilized for a period of time. And the first time can be very, very nerve-wracking for people. What if there was a time in which they went through the motions of it, but didn't actually have to get radiation? So pretend environments like this can help reduce some of the anxiety around interfacing with something for the first time. There were also examples some time back that I saw of a financial organization that had offered a play money to people so that they could try their hand at investing without actually losing their money. And like you saw in the Second Life example, consider a completely separate experience or a tool for first timers. A good example of this is home buying. And home buying is something that people do for the very first time very often. What if there was a way in which it could be identified that these people are here for the first time? They need to be coached through all of this, whether it means creating a separate service or a pathway, or creating a separate digital tool that coaches them through the actual act of home buying. And consistency is key. Very often, a lot of companies tend to build up a different interaction system in some aspects of the interactions and a completely different one in other aspects. So it takes time for people to learn interactions in one place. And this is true of just company-wide interactions as well as cross-company. So if I'm used to my insurance company A working in a certain way, if I move to insurance company B, I expect the same way of working. If there is no consistency across the industry, it's very difficult for people to learn and get used to new systems. And then build diversity in the teams. A variety of perspectives will help to think of the things that might not come to a team that is not very diverse. And as designers, assumption mapping is an important tool. What we try to do at MadPow is that when we are building out a journey map is a user's interaction with a company or a service. But on the flip side of that, consider it the other side of the mirror. We should also think about the company's assumptions about that user. So when we have been breaking down those steps of the user does this and the user does this, we should also write down our assumptions of the user knows how to do this or the user knows where to go next, and then test those assumptions in our research and build in ways to solve for it when the user doesn't know what to do next or where to go next. And lastly, keep an eye on your data because this will tell you whether you're designing for newcomers in an accurate manner. You will see things like I know this won't map one-to-one, but if you look at the data in its whole, you will notice things such as people dropping off of an experience or people not converting, people calling in for help to the call center all the time for help with navigating a certain situation. In just low customer satisfaction scores, data such as this can help tell you whether you're meeting these unique needs. And don't forget that while I talked a lot about people that are new to the United States, because that's where I started thinking about this problem. But honestly, this is true of everyone, and everyone is a newcomer to something at some point in their lives. Thank you, everyone.
Is there one more slide? Just to cue it up for the Q&A.
Yep.
Well, I hope you found that as enjoyable as I did. So I wanted to take a moment. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask Priyama or myself, simply enter them into the question box on the right-hand side of the interface. And we'd love to have a conversation about what's been your experience as a newcomer, or have you had to design for newcomers in your current role? So if you could just take a moment to put in any questions, that would be great. And just an aside, Priyama, I'm obviously not new to the United States, but I did do my junior year abroad.
Oh, you did? Okay.
In England, where you think it would be like completely straightforward, and it was like blindsided over and over again by things. Particularly when I was there, I bought a blow dryer to dry my hair. And after walking all the way down into the town, which was like 2 miles from the university, I got all the way back. And I opened it up, and it just had 2 wires. There was no plug. It was just 2 wires. And I was like, and I went to take it to the porter, who's like the guard at the dorm, and I said, "What is this?" And he's like, "Oh, don't you know you have to buy a plug?" I was like, why would it occur to me that an appliance would not come with a plug? So then I had to walk the 2 miles back into the town to buy this stupid plug to bring it all the way up to the school, and I didn't have a screwdriver, so he had to assemble it for me.
Oh, wow.
It was a lot of work to have dry hair. Here is a question. So this is coming in from Liz, and she asked, I was wondering if you know of any resources for creating a physical meeting space for newcomers from various locations.
I don't think that I do. What is the context behind that, Liz? What are you trying to achieve?
waiting for an answer.
Yep.
You also can click on questions if you want to be able to read them as I'm reading them aloud.
Oh, okay.
Just, yeah, so Liz, do you have context to that, just so we can get a little bit more clarity about why you're asking? Okay, here she goes. I work as a job developer for newcomer women, and we want to design our meeting space to be as comfortable as possible.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know of any resources. I'd be happy to chat with you about that. Please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. But one of the things that sort of comes to mind when you talk about this is experience working with people from different cultural backgrounds. And I've seen that, I don't know if this is going to be your particular experience. So if the women that you're working with will be from different backgrounds. But something I noticed while doing healthcare research is that culturally, people have different levels of comfort with speaking in a group environment. Um, because either they don't feel they're not expressive, the culture is not expressive, it doesn't encourage expression, or it could be that the culture is such that they want to keep things private. So there are different things such as that you could keep a lookout while designing for this space.
It's a little bit of a tangent, but I was recently watching a video about how to make sure that your medical office is friendly to transgender and LGBT people. LGBTIQ.
Yes.
I got it all. And they had suggested even putting little triggers in there, like the gay pride flag or the transgender pride flag, and it's just these little signals that would let people know that this is a safe place and we're trying to meet your needs.
Yeah.
So if there's like some way you can indicate to people when they walk in that this is a welcoming space, we don't expect you to know, and we are here to meet your needs.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that might be in your contact to these newcomers, if it's their first time getting a job or what it is, but if there's something you can do just in signage or how they're greeted, just to or the forms they might have to fill out when they come in, just to say, welcome, we know you're new, we're here to work with you. It's just to make it feel welcoming and just disarm them at the beginning and make them take a deep breath and say, okay, this is a safe space. They know I'm uncomfortable, but you're here to help me through this process. It's a great video. Okay. One in from Dana. It's like, personally, my experience was buying property in another country. There was no website to easily explain the process, even though I had a lawyer. I wanted to learn a bit on my own, as I didn't want to completely put all trust in this lawyer. Smart. I wanted to educate myself. It was a nightmare. The sites were in the language of the country. Some were not even, though almost 30% of people buying property there are from outside the country. I've heard nightmare stories of people trying to buy in like France or Italy. So very much realizing that who your customer base is, and making sure you design for them. Okay, Dana also asked, I would also like to ask to explain number 14, user assumptions, in a bit more detail. I did not completely understand.
Right. So assumption mapping is a technique that is often used in lean techniques. So it does assumption mapping is wider than I used it in this context. So in assumption mapping, you make assumptions on the business, on the technology, etc. And one aspect of that is assuming things about the user. So for example, suppose you're making a journey where Priyama is going to figure out how much her copay is going to be. So she would first, suppose, make an appointment with the doctor and then go and check out the website to see what the copay amount would be, the insurance website. So there are two assumptions being made over here. The first assumption there is Priyama knows the right doctor to make an appointment with. there could also be some more in that vein, which is things such as Priyama gets an appointment with the doctor. And secondly, Priyama knows that there is a website that she can go to check her copay. So these are two assumptions being made. So when we are mapping out the customer journey, we should also map out our assumptions on the actions and the thoughts and the behavior of the people.
Do you know of anything out there that's a resource to really kind of explain assumption mapping, or?
I looked for it to include it, but all the assumption mapping resources I found were VIDA. So they had the whole process within it. So, assuming things about the company, the resources, technology, etc. But if you just Google assumption mapping, you'll find a lot of resources out there.
I mean, even just having a line every step in that touch point to say, what assumptions do you think?
Yeah.
Is just a useful line to have. So back to Liz, who's creating that physical space. She stated that she was thinking of trying to incorporate textile decor that has a hint of various cultures.
Oh,
so
I love that. Yeah.
Again, builds on the signaling whether it's a beautiful African textile or a Scandinavian or Indian.
Yeah.
Again, it's those whole things you're trying to make people say, hey, it's kind of like trying to make sure we are trying to meet your needs and say this is a place where you're welcome.
Yeah, we acknowledge your culture.
Yeah.
Most importantly, we acknowledge that things may be different for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so any other questions? Okay. Do you want to move to the next slide, please?
Yep.
Okay, so thank you so much for attending. This is being recorded, and I'll be sending it out probably later today. The slides are available right now. If you go into the handout section, you could download the PDF of the presentation if you'd like it. I will also be emailing that presentation along with the thank you email. And I wanted to let you know we have 2 more webinars coming up on the schedule. We have one on December 19th. The topic is designing choices. It's specifically around designing choices around insurance, but you may find it interesting. It's only 30 minutes. And then in January, Mars Pet Care and I will be talking about why is my dog's health care better than mine? Learning from veterinarians to improve human health. And that is my personal passion of why is it so much easier to deal with my cat's health care than mine. And again, I just want to remind you that our Health Experience Design Conference is coming up April 14th and 15th of 2020. Registration is now open, and as our rates go up on January 1st. So if you have any money left for the end of the year, now would be the time to buy a ticket. Again, if you want to learn anything else about the center, just join us at centerhxd.com to learn more, and reach out to Priyama or myself with any questions, and watch your inbox for a thank you note with all the links to the recording and the slides. So thank you so much for your time and attention. We appreciate it and hope to see you on here again soon. Thank you.